This meeting to order. This is the meeting with Neighborhood Preservation Committee and the Greater Syracuse Land Bank presenting their annual report. With me, I have Councilor Hogan, Councilor Nave, Councilor Peniagua, and Councilor Monto. And Caitlin Wright of the Land Bank. Thank you. We can just jump right in.
Thank you for convening this committee meeting. I think you guys might be getting sick of me. I've been here a lot lately. The Land Bank Act requires that we report annually to the legislative bodies that established the Land Bank in writing and in person, and field any questions you may have. We are required to report on the projects undertaken by the Land Bank during the previous year, the money spent by the Land Bank, and the administrative activities of the Land Bank. So I sent out a pretty detailed report in advance of this meeting. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions that they want to dive into. Otherwise, I can kind of give a high-level summary.
Yeah.
On page 3, you'll see the properties that we acquired. We acquired 77 properties last year. We're still significantly lower than we were at the peak when the Land Bank was first started. The city was foreclosing on 300 or 400 properties a year. At that time, there were 4,000 seizable properties when the Land Bank was established, and we figured if they all got foreclosure notices, about half would pay and avoid foreclosure, which is good, and the other half that are truly abandoned would get foreclosed on and come to the Land Bank. It's been many, many years now, and we have acquired over 2,000 properties from the city, but we still have a significant number of seizable properties. We figured once we got all caught up with that backlog, every April, new properties become seizable. At the time, it was about 800 new properties that would become seizable every April. And we figured the redemption rate on the backlog was going to be 50% because those properties had been delinquent for many, many years.
Yeah.
But the new ones that become seizable in April, they should only be 2.5 years behind at that point. So we thought the redemption rate on those would be a lot higher. Of those 800, maybe 700 would pay their taxes, and 100 would get foreclosed on towards the end of the calendar year and come to the Land Bank, and we would have about that volume annually. We still have not gotten to the point where we're caught up on the backlog. There are still, I would assume, over 1,500 seizable properties. Last week, I showed you guys a map of some site assembly that we're doing on the Near West Side, and I know that there has been a lot of concern voiced by the city council, by neighborhood groups, by the county legislature about how many properties we have in our inventory. And in large part, that's because the process of doing that site assembly is agonizingly slow. It took years to put together those 45 building sites on the Near West Side. It's a lot of grant money that we have to go get for demolitions, a lot of lot line adjustments, and we're often waiting for the one next door to come to us through the foreclosure pipeline. So I think if we could speed up the foreclosure pipeline and catch up with all that backlog, we could speed up our site assembly process and have a lot more shovel-ready sites ready to go. We have about 350 building lots right now in our inventory that are ready to be built on. And then there's quite a few more that we're in the process of assembling with a neighboring parcel, waiting for one to come to us, that sort of thing. So the faster we can go catching up on those foreclosures, the faster we can get these properties prepared for new development and get them out the door.
As far as some of those old, like pre-Land Bank foreclosures, I know like there's one on Onondaga where Rich Street turns to another street name, but
Is it White Street?
no, it's not White Street. It's literally on Onondaga, but it Rich Street, and then it's going towards, I think it's Holland. But it's like actually it's one property in. It's a old, like almost one of those mansion type of
The
properties.
green one?
I thought it was like a white or grayish looking.
In the corner. That's the one in the corner.
Yeah.
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 That it has the little
And that-
lot
that
that
was-
they want to give away with the house because you can build anything there.
Huh?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So what is it?
Yeah,
Here it
okay.
is. Yeah. So
One in
that-
from the corner.
Well, the corner is those apartment buildings, is the one that's right next to it. That was in the pipeline from years and years ago, was one of those dollar properties that sold like twice and then came back. And I
Not
just,
talking about the Oz house.
not the one that's being renovated.
No, it's still on the market. We still own it. I don't know if maybe it might be another one. I'm not sure.
This is all the way down, but we'll
Okay,
get to it.
yeah,
We'll get to it. Okay.
So properties that were foreclosed on before the land bank existed.
Yes.
Okay.
Years before. Yeah.
Not much we can do about those unless they become seizable again. Then they would come through the pipeline again.
I think they are. I think I'll give you guys the information, because I think it's still owned by the city. It was
Oh.
returned several times.
Interesting.
Because at that time with the sight unseen, you never know what the amount of work. It has an elevator in it. I think that was a major issue. Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I don't think the city owns any structures like that. I know they own a lot of vacant lots. But we can look into
I'll
it
look
later.
into it.
Yeah.
I'll get the address.
I will say, though, when you talk about properties getting returned, if you want to skip ahead to page 7, we've got some photos here of a property that we did have to get back through foreclosure. So when we sell a property, like you were saying, people used to buy them sight unseen. So they didn't know how much work the property was going to need. The city, as the seller, had no idea how much work the property was going to need. You couldn't really make an informed decision about whether this person had the skills and the resources necessary to bring it up to code.
Yeah.
Obviously, now that these properties come into the land bank first, we clean out all the trash and debris, we draft a scope of work so that buyers can see what it's going to take to bring it up to code, and we vet our buyers to make sure that they have the skills and the financial resources needed to do the renovations that are required. 99% of the time that works, but every now and then people run into problems. And so this house here that you see on page 7, we sold to a gentleman who had the financial resources. He works in the construction industry, so we thought he had the skills necessary, and he just could not pull it together. You can see this is the after photo here of what he had done to it in a year. I'm just kind of befuddled by how it got into this condition. But so if somebody does not complete those required renovations within a year, they are then in default on our development enforcement mortgage, and we can move to foreclose and get the property back so that it doesn't have to sit there for years and years before anything gets done to it.
Yeah.
In this case, we sent him the foreclosure notifications, and he agreed to give it back to us with a deed in lieu of foreclosure, so that saved us a little bit of time. And we got in there as quickly as we could and demolished this house. It's just 2 houses down from the Blarney Stone on Avery. It's a very visible street. We were getting a lot of complaints from the Tip Hill Neighborhood Association. So I'm sorry that they had to look at it like that for about a year, but we do have that recapture mechanism that I think is a really useful tool in situations like this.
Yeah. It was Pat who was complaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that is helpful. And even with the inception of the land bank, the fact that the properties are no longer sight unseen, because that was the major issue, that people didn't know the scope of work until they got in there, and then they couldn't afford it. So.
And even something as simple as the fact that we take title to them proactively, we can advertise them better. So way back when they were selling them sight unseen, they had a list of properties in the finance office. You could go down and ask for the seizable list, and then do drive-bys and maybe make an offer on one. Because we own it, something as simple as putting a for sale sign on it makes a world of difference. We've had situations where people are living with their extended family and they see the house across the street goes up for sale, and they can give us a call immediately because they can see that that opportunity is available. They might not have ever known that there was a process to go through. Yeah. So something as simple as putting a for sale sign on it makes a world of difference and lets the neighbors know what's happening. And then we also obviously get them listed on all of the real estate websites, Zillow and Realtor.com and our own website.
Yeah.
Hey, Caitlin, can you go over with the expenses? Because I know, I know a few expenses you have to endure, but can you go over with that?
Sure.
The accrued.
At the very end of your packet, we've attached our balance sheet and our profit and loss statement. So it's labeled Statement of Activity, and you can
Okay.
go through and see all of our revenues and expenses there. But I can kind of walk you through the life cycle of a property. We purchase it from the city for $326. We spend money to go in and clean out all the trash and debris. Our staff goes in and drafts up that scope of work. We usually have all the utilities turned off in these properties. Very rarely is it in good enough condition to turn on the water and the power? But occasionally we have water and power on. If it's an occupied property, we're engaging Catholic Charities to provide relocation assistance, and we pay them each year for their case management services. And also, we have a fund that they can draw on to cover first and last month's rent, security deposits, moving expenses, things like that.
I know you had a problem last year. There was a house on Howard Street, and people were asking me. I think there's a lot of illegal dumping going on, and you have to bear the brunt of it, right? You're not. It's not a free service from DPW because you have to. The same thing when you have to mow the lawns, and that's another, like on East Division Street.
Exactly. We're mowing lawns, we're picking up trash, we're doing board ups. We have a periodic inspector that goes around and takes front and back photos of all of our properties and lets us know if they have been broken into, but our own staff actually visits them even more frequently than that. And if there's one where there's a recurring problem, Dave will go check on it every morning, and he might have to board it up several times that week, but by checking on it every day, it kind of changes that behavior and deters someone from continuing to do that.
You have two other properties right on Hiawatha Boulevard, houses that were built in front of railroad tracks. You know what I mean?
One of those we recently demolished, and we sold it to the developer that's doing the school bus project right behind. The other one we just recently acquired. It is currently occupied, so we're working on providing that woman with relocation assistance. As soon as she leaves, we will demolish that house and sell it to the school bus.
I'm just wondering why. I don't think people want to live in front of a train, but that's how it was back in that day. There's some nice houses still on Hiawatha Boulevard.
Yeah, we get a lot of homes in that situation where it's really just not the ideal location to have built a house. You know, Syracuse was much more crowded way back when. There were 220,000 people living here. We were cramming in houses into backyards, and that level of density just isn't really desirable anymore. We recently acquired about 6 or 7 properties in a row on the 100 block of West Brighton, right across from Duncan Bright there. They're all in horrible condition. We will be demolishing all of those, and then that'll be a large assemblage. It's in a R5 zoning district, so multifamily housing could be built there.
Where is this?
On the 100 block of West Brighton, right across from Duncan Bright. We're focused on putting together those shovel-ready sites, like I said, where new development can take place. And with the city's guidance, we're focused on the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative areas that they have flagged for infill construction. And we partner with Home Headquarters, and we're also starting to do some of our own residential development of 1- and 2-family homes. Generally speaking, those homes that are going to be sold to owner-occupants, they want to build on less busy streets. If you have a choice of where to buy, you're not going to want to buy necessarily on Brighton where there's that much traffic. So those busier streets like Brighton that are typically zoned for multifamily, we'll work with groups like Housing Visions to do apartment rentals. You may have seen that Housing Visions did 5 2-family homes this past year at the corner of Colvin and Midland, and then 5 more, 1 block up at the corner of Beard and Midland. That's another example where that kind of site assembly just takes so long. You know, we went in and knocked down probably 5 houses in a row on Midland, and for years got complaints from the neighbors about, oh, you just clear cut this whole block. What are you going to do there? What's the plan? Well, it takes Housing Visions 3 or 4 years to actually get the low-income housing tax credits lined up and start construction. But now they have put up 10 beautiful new homes right in that 2-block stretch, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah. Now, as far as the, do you do any communication with the existing homeowners on that block to kind of get a feel of, you know, what they want to see there as well?
We definitely do outreach when we're going to be doing a demolition, and we put door hangers on the surrounding properties to let people know that that's going to be happening. And then we don't speak to the neighbors on that block necessarily, but we do go to T&T meetings and talk to neighborhood groups about what kinds of development they want to see in their neighborhood before something large like that is undertaken.
Yeah. Now, with the properties that you guys sell and all of the issues with like lead and stuff, is there a route moving forward where you guys would be either taking out the lead pipe or figuring out assistance with the new owners to do so?
That's a good question. The lead water service lines.
Yes.
I'm actually going to be looking for a little bit of guidance from the city on that in terms of what are people required to do.
Yeah.
For many, many years, they were not required to replace that lead service line, and I know that the city is focused on going around and replacing them with some grant funds. It hasn't been made clear to me if that's going to be the responsibility of the private property owners as well.
Yeah, maybe that should be something to discuss because of maybe being that they're going to be replacing some maybe prior to you guys turning it over, they can already go in and do that before.
Yeah, we need to develop our plan for that.
Yeah.
I will say that the water department coordinates with us when we're doing demolitions, so they're not going to bother to replace a service line if they know that the house is coming down.
Yeah.
So we're at least making sure that we
Yeah.
aren't wasteful in that way.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I have one question. Remember when we took down the Easy Cafe at Grand Boulevard? And we talked about, was Guy's Auto interested in that lot? It's not big. What we could do with that lot.
We haven't received a purchase offer from anyone yet. I don't know if they've called the office or not from Guy's Auto, I know across the street.
Yeah, what I would like to see, and I spoke to Mr. Calabuffo, we can get a bike rack for the Vail bikes up there. I would like to see them purchase that. I think that would be a big help for a small lot.
Well, we'd like to see some sort of commercial development happen there. I think we
Right.
can fit a lot more than a bike rack
Well,
on.
we could take a couple other buildings up there.
I had a good conversation with the gentleman that owns the gas station across the street,
Yeah.
who's interested in building some sort of commercial plaza. But we're just concerned about how much space is really available. The neighboring property,
Yeah, there is, yeah.
that blue single-story apartment building, they have an easement across the lot that's going to prevent us from developing all of it. But I understand that they're also maybe interested in selling, so we're looking into whether or not we could buy that, because they have a lot of vacant land between the property line and the apartment building.
Yeah, we like to see utilized.
More than they could ever really use for parking.
Yeah.
So it would give us a little bit more room to put some sort of commercial development there. And it's right on that straight shot into the ballpark there, so
Yeah, it is.
not every day, but when there's a game, there's a lot of traffic.
There is, and what some people used to do, they had a lot, they used to sell parking.
Yeah,
Park.
well, I want them to sell
Just watch
dinners
them
and
Yeah,
more
I
than
remember back in the day, they did that.
Can you kind of touch on your financial position, like just give us an overview?
We have enough unrestricted cash on hand to carry us for 9 months in an emergency. So it costs about $2 million a year just to keep things running at the most basic level, mowing the lawns, doing the board ups, paying for liability insurance, all of the things that are really not optional. As grant money comes in, we'll do X number of demolitions, stabilizations where we do roof siding and windows or foundation repairs, occasionally full rehabs, and we're now looking at doing some new construction. But all of those things, we only do as much as there is grant money available each year. But just to do the bare minimum that we have to do is about $2 million a year. And we have, like I said, a fund balance that could cover about 9 months of that. We ran a deficit last year of about $130,000, and that was with $1.25 million of financial support from the city. The funding that we get from you guys is critical because it helps us cover those non-optional operating expenses. And we cover about half of our operating expenses each year from the sale of real estate. Last year was not a great sales year for us. Like I showed you earlier, that pipeline of properties coming into the land bank has been smaller and smaller since 2019. So we just don't have a lot of inventory to sell right now. We have about 14 properties on the market.
How many are in the inventory, actually?
We have 150 structures in our inventory. About 100 of those are demo candidates. Maybe 18 are currently occupied.
Anybody occupying the demo candidates?
1 or 2. We're working on providing them with relocation assistance. A handful of those occupants are in leases with us because they're working on getting mortgage qualified. But then there's a handful that are working on relocation as well.
The 150 is commercial and houses or just houses?
It's almost all residential, but that's all structures. Some of them are commercial.
Many of those are historically designated or
Very few.
local.
That picture you showed earlier is the house that's kind of commonly known as the Oz House, even though it's not the
Oh, is
Oz
it?
House,
Oh,
and that's a
okay.
whole other story. But I know it's it's insane. But
That
that
is in our
property,
inventory.
yes, and that is a local landmark. So it's locally designated, and it's also listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Yeah.
As for the historic thing, we will sometimes go out and proactively get properties listed on the National Register so that our buyers can then access historic tax credits.
Yeah.
We did that with the big green mansion that Luke Esposito and Chris LaBerge are working on putting together a project at. So they'll have access to state and federal tax credits.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a help and sometimes it's a hindrance.
That's why I asked, because a lot of people get a little nervous when they hear that it's a historic property, or even seeing the size scale of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
150 houses are, that we have in the inventory.
Well, 150 structures, a handful of those are
Structures,
commercial, but
and
most
the
of them
rest
are
all
houses.
vacant lots.
Yeah,
How
about
many of them?
650 vacant lots.
So we got about 750 under our control.
We've got about 800 properties in our inventory right now, and of those vacant lots, about half of them are shovel-ready sites ready to be built on.
And out of the 150, how many are pending? I'm sorry, did you say that already?
I've got to go back and double-check how many are pending.
Well, 100 of the 150 are tear downs, right?
Just about 100, yeah.
Oh, tear downs, oh, okay.
But there's generally 20 or 30 properties that are sale pending at any given time.
Okay, in years before or last year, we talked about the houses or that you have in the flood zones and how difficult that was for people to.
Yeah.
Have we moved in any way the needle?
I mean, there's no real solution to be had.
No.
So the state will not put funding into any new construction or rehabs in the floodplain, so we're not going to get any grant dollars. If a private individual wants to purchase one of those homes and rehab them, when they go to pull their building permits, if the value of the work they're doing exceeds 50% of the current value of the house, then they have to bring it up to code with the floodplain standards. So they would have to fill in the basement, elevate it 6 feet, move all the mechanicals up to the attic, and obviously that's just not cost effective. So you might look at that house and say, that's a renovation candidate because it doesn't really need all that much work, but it needs more than you think it does because of all the floodplain requirements. So
Is
we're
there a
not,
plan for that area? I mean,
well, we're not listing any of those for sale because I don't want to set buyers up to fail when they get into the permit office and find that it's impossible to renovate. We have demolished a lot of properties in the floodplain. I think that there needs to be some sort of permanent green space solution, but we would definitely look to the city for guidance on what they want to see happen there.
But if you were to have enough of them in a row, then that could be potential development for a larger density if it's
Well,
that's
yes.
raised up.
but yeah, they would have to be elevated. And generally speaking, if you look at new construction in the city right now, the cost of development is always going to exceed the value of the finished product. You're pretty much only seeing new construction with government subsidy, and the
Yeah.
state won't do that
Yeah.
in the floodplain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michelle Samansky, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood Development. So I just want to echo what Caitlin is saying. We have the same stipulations as far as uses of federal grant dollars as well. So it really hamstrings any ability that we have to help facilitate development there, especially for a residential standpoint. We do everything we possibly can to kind of line up opportunities where there's capacity to do so. Typically, it's going to be a developer that is a larger, kind of more commercial type of development that would have the capacity to do that. But in the interim, the green space is really the quickest solution, but something that we're committed to trying to figure out where we can.
Yeah.
So the Attorney General money, does that generally come, does the legislature put it in the budget and then she,
We haven't gotten any money from the Attorney General in probably 7 years. That
nothing in the budget they share at all?
Well, there is state money, and those are two different things. So back after the 2008 mortgage foreclosure crisis, the Attorney General was suing a lot of the big banks for their financial misdeeds and getting huge settlements, and they wanted to direct that money towards mitigating the effects of the foreclosure crisis. So they gave a lot of money to land banks, but they haven't gotten any of those settlements in many, many years. Now, once that dried up, there was a period of several years where we weren't getting any help from the state. And the New York Land Bank Association did a lot of advocacy to get money in the budget. And I think we're coming into the 4th year now in a row where there will be state money. That's what they call their Land Bank Initiative. It's administered by New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And that's one of those things, like I mentioned, as much as is available each year, that's how much we'll spend on either demolitions or stabilizations. So during that dry spell when we weren't getting anything from the state, fortunately, ARPA came along and filled the gap. And with $5 million from you guys, from ARPA, we did a lot of demolitions and a lot of stabilization projects. And then as soon as this Land Bank Initiative program was released, we continued the work that we had been doing with ARPA. So that has done the bulk of our demos the past few years. And we're doing more and more stabilizations each year. I just posted a picture on our Facebook page this morning of a house that's getting new siding, roof, and windows with the LBI money. And we're using that in a combination of ways. A lot of it is for properties that we own, that we want to prevent them from becoming a demolition candidate, or if we know that it's going to be a very expensive rehab. If we can do that exterior shell, that saves our buyer from having to spend that money, and they just come in and finish the interior, making it a cost-effective project for them. We also are occasionally directing that money towards owner-occupied homes where they have purchased from us, but they've run into a financial problem and they can't finish the project. So that one that I showed this morning on Beard Place, there's a young man renovating that to live in, and he's just really struggling financially to get the project done. So we came in to do the windows, siding, and roof. It helps him. It also makes it look better. It's in a highly visible location right across from the library in Sankofa Park, and I don't want people having to look at that eyesore. So we're happy to use the LBI money for those kinds of things. So we got probably over $5 million in LBI over the past couple of years.
What's in the budget this year? If they ever pass it.
Right. I believe there's another $50 million for land banks in the budget. There was nothing in the governor's proposed budget, but both of the Senate and Assembly One House bills included $50 million. We'll see what actually ends up in the final budget. I don't know what's happening with them.
Caitlin, where are we procedurally as far as the Delaware Geddes or Delaware Grace project goes? I mean, as far as, that was obviously a disappointment. We're holding a lot of properties there.
We have a handful of properties under contract to sell to La Liga, and they're working, they're part of a national network called the Acacia Network. So there's a whole bunch of nonprofits that are allied with them that have more development capacity and more development experience. And they've hired Holmsking Colquist to be their local architect. They have a very capable tax credit consultant working on the project, and they're working with Rich and Gardner to be their general contractor. They will be submitting another low-income housing tax credit application this year. They're also applying for HHAP and some other state programs. And part of the difficulty with that project is that all these various state programs you end up having to layer together to make a project work, they all have different funding timelines. And often the LIHTC reviewers will want to see that you have an HHAP commitment before they will give you a LIHTC commitment. So it's kind of a chaotic process. And that's why when I mentioned earlier about how it takes Housing Visions 3 or 4 years to actually get the funding committed and break ground, it's agonizingly slow, but they're in that process now, and I'm optimistic that they will get funded this year.
Is that big church, is that included in their development plan?
It does not include the church, so it would include everything on the north side of Delaware Street. There would be new buildings on the 100, 200, 300, and 400 block, and the church is immediately across the street from the 300 block there. We purchased that church because the other 3 corners of that intersection are going to be part of the La Liga project, and we didn't want this 4th corner to be purchased by some slumlord that was just going to neglect the building. So we own it now. We have CNS engineers in there coming up with construction drawings so that we can put the roof replacement out to bid. It's going to be an extremely expensive roof replacement, but it needs to be done. The building has a lot of water damage, and we want to prevent that from getting any worse. And then, as soon as that kind of gets underway, we'll start engaging the neighbors to talk about what do they want to see there. It's in a residential zoning district, and to reuse that church purely for residential, I think would be really difficult. This is
To be a church?
It could still be a church. I don't know of any congregations that could afford to bring it up to code, but it could still be a church. It was designed by Archimedes Russell, and we've been told that it's eligible for listing on the National Register, but it's not currently listed. And it's a weird building because obviously it was built in the late 1800s. They added on a school in the 1920s. From the outside, it's this beautiful brick, kind of Romanesque looking thing. There was a bad fire in the 50s, and so when you go inside, it's like very mid-century modern. It's very
I've been
weird.
there. I've been inside.
So I'm not sure if the state would actually say that it is eligible for listing or not because it's been changed so much.
It has
But I think it's more on the outside, and if there's not like a significant amount of non-conforming
Okay.
property on the outside, then it should still be eligible.
My hope is that we could get it listed so that somebody could use tax credits to renovate it.
it even has a basketball court inside.
Yeah, it's got a lot of neat space that I think could be used as a community center or
Daycare
any number of
facility,
things.
maybe.
Daycare facility, yeah.
I mean, that's the
It's got all
reason.
the
that we
classrooms
declared it.
upstairs. Yeah.
Right, it could, there is some use there, especially if the neighborhood, we finally get some stuff going on down there.
Yeah, so we're optimistic about the future of Delaware Street. Immediately north of that, we talked last week about all the infill construction that we're hoping to do and that Home Headquarters has planned on Merriman Street. So that's 45 new homes. Once those are underway, we want to continue to move south. The church will be part of that. Delaware Street is part of that.
Fitch Street,
We've also started a lot of site assembly on Fitch Street. So last year, at the very end of the year, we did 8 demolitions on Fitch. There was also a property on the corner that was privately owned, had a bad fire, and it was surrounded by land bank properties. So we purchased that and we took title in January. That will be demolished very soon. And we've put together space to build 25 to 35 new homes on Fitch Street. So that would be the next wave and kind of keep continuing on one block after another there.
And what's the ratio between homeowner occupancy and rentals?
The 45 homes that we have planned will all be owner occupied.
Okay,
But everything on Delaware Street that La Liga's working on will be rentals, multifamily rentals.
okay. Okay. I don't think I have anything else. You guys?
Were there any other financial questions?
Well,
you
I
had
did,
for me?
as far as, I'm sorry, as far as, with, excuse me, with the decrease in properties and of course, property sales, is like how staff, are you concerned with staff retention at all?
Well, we had 2 salesmen full-time. It's been an interesting couple of years since COVID. So there was a period of time there where everything was shut down. And it was actually a good opportunity for our guys to go back through our older inventory and reevaluate things. We got a lot of new listings up. Daniel told me the other day that at one time we had 120 active listings. I can't even believe that we were operating at that volume. So we had 2 full-time sales guys at that point. One of them resigned a few years ago, and we haven't refilled that position just because we don't have a lot of listings. But otherwise, we don't really want to let anybody go. We've got 8 people on staff, and they all play a critical role.
it's amazing how much you get done with just 8 folks. I mean, it's really is.
We also have a robust team of subcontractors that help us get everything done. So
Right, but just
yeah.
sifting through
Yeah.
who's really good and who isn't, it's amazing too, the subcontractors.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I do appreciate, I wanted to say, the vacant land that's utilized, what you do, because I was at Holly Green meeting, and that they have a garden, and they can make a purchase just to make garden, and it's so beneficial. People in the neighborhood need fresh food, that you're able to work with John and Dallas and a lot of people in that area. It's much appreciated, really, that we don't let it go to waste this land, that, something good's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. We are really focused on putting together these construction sites, like I said, but oftentimes the lots are too small to be built on, and in those cases, we need to find some alternative purpose for them. And we have about 15 groups that lease lots from us to do community gardens, and most of them are really kind of vibrant community gathering places.
They are. I've been to a couple of them.
Yeah. What about the gas station on South Ave? How's that going?
We're still under contract to sell that to Johnny. He has a commitment from Sunoco, and they are willing to financially assist with putting in all of the gas station infrastructure, the underground tanks and fuel lines. But he's having a hard time securing the commercial financing that he needs to do the rest of the project. We've actually been doing some personal outreach to local banks, trying to help grease the wheels on that. But that's not a unique problem. Almost all of our larger properties like that that are commercial in nature are having a hard time getting financing right now. And it's partly because of the high interest rates, but It also seems like commercial lenders are just being overly cautious the past couple of years.
Okay, okay.
You know, I mean, he had a commitment from a local bank and they withdrew it. So
really?
they seem to be kind of reevaluating what level of risk they're willing to take on, and it's causing problems for a lot of land bank properties.
Okay. And my last question.
Another challenge.
That's
I knew
all
I
of
should
that.
ask that before you asked it.
The real difficulty with that project is, you know, it's a multi-million-dollar project, and there's a lot of expense just to even do the architectural designs. And you need to do those designs so that you can pull your permits so that once it's permitted, then you can get a commercial loan. So it's all that expensive work that needs to happen before you can even close on a commercial loan that is the difficulty with the castle and a lot of other projects. And I know the city's looked at a whole bunch of different ways that they can provide help to people for those pre-development expenses, including ARPA and a few other funds. So I talk frequently with Eric Ennis and his team about how we can keep that moving forward. And I think that there's an opportunity there for us to help them finish those drawings so they can get to the next step.
So is there like any concern with, you know, the continual weathering of, like you just said, the one on Delaware, you know, and then on this one, like we don't want to lose those properties.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, Delaware is vacant land, so that one gives me a little less anxiety. But yeah, the church, the Green Mansion, all of those buildings are really taking a beating in our climate here. And the bread factory building over on Maple, they're not getting any better.
Yeah, because I know, you know, we lost the one up on the north side.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to see that happen again.
I will say, I mentioned earlier how frequently our team goes around and inspects our vacant buildings and keeps them secured. We did have kind of a rash of arsons on the near west side last year, and none of them were in land bank properties. So I'm really impressed with the work that our guys do to keep those buildings secure, and I hope that will help with these larger properties as well. Obviously, people were able to break into the Maria Regina campus.
Oh, no, I wasn't talking about that one.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the one that used to be behind the 7-Eleven that we end up.
Oh, yeah. Oof, that's a
Yeah.
whole other can of worms.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was about to ask something else, but I forgot what it was, so I guess we are done. Okay. All right, so we call this meeting adjourned. I'll get a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.
We
Thank you very much.
appreciate it.